onto Tirreno Adriatico, stage 5. Well, what a day of cycling. If on any other day, no spoilers if you're listening on YouTube, this would have been still is one of the stage for the ages. 200-kilometer stage, or 205 kilometers. The first half, pancake flat. And then the last 100 kilometers, they do a nasty Imola style circuit, 1.5 Ks at 10.1% with ramps. Another climb in there was like 1K at 4.8% up to the finish line with like 12% ramps. And they do, I can't even count, Benji, 12 or 13 reps of this. Absolutely disgusting from Castellalto to Castelfidardo. And it started bucketing down. They go past Porto Sant'Elpidio. That's where Peter Sagan, Joaquim Rodriguez, and Nibali went crazy, dropping Froome and Cadel Evans and Contador and Tirreno Adriatico's Stage 6 2013. You'll remember that. Well, it was an absolute banger again today, Benji. What was it looking like when live coverage started, Benji? There wasn't really a selection, I don't think.
Nope, no selection at all. We had a 5-man group, I think, at the head of the race, which included the likes of Ballerini and Ganna in the breakaway. So those two riders are definitely strong riders to have in the breakaway. Some others in there as well. That breakaway was kind of destined to fail when it comes to this parkour. The only hope that people had was Filippo Ganna in that breakaway, setting up something crazy today. But the parkour, we probably both thought this is not happening. Definitely because in the peloton, we've got plenty of riders that can do something on this parkour. You had to pick Alaphilippe. Sorry, I had to rub that in. Van der Poel was my pick. I think Van Aert was one of the favorites for doing well on this parkour as well. Pogacar was one of the riders, obviously, as the leader of the race to do well here. And depending on how the race would open up and how early the race would open up, we could see total destruction because the stage is made for that. I think looking at this parkour, it really started properly opening up. Not the first time they went into the circuit, because we've got that steeper climb that you spoke about, Castelfidardo, that is making the most of a difference here. They go into that climbing section the first time, and in the peloton, we see Van Aert with his team. They were still there, they were still helping, because obviously it's the first circuit, they haven't been destroyed yet. They were at the front, they were pacing to control. They weren't pacing hard or anything. So they kept controlling that tempo. They went there with that first circuit, and it started dripping rain. You said it, buckets started falling, not at the start. At the start, it was still sunny, and it was really into that, to the end of the first circuit somewhere, that it started slowly but surely raining. And the roads became wetter and wetter. We had some crash in the peloton accordingly. I can't remember who crashed. I think Patrick Conrad at a certain point in the race. But luckily, a lot of people got spared from crashing Tirreno because it could have been much worse knowing the circumstances. They go into the second circuit, which means that they move on to the Castelfidardo climb, that steep climb. And I was watching this race with my mom, and I said to my mom, I can feel it. Van der Poel's going to attack. And 2 seconds later, on the left side of the road, there was the legend himself.
What a hot take, Benji.
Nacho Van der Poel.
I've never seen him attack early before.
So my mom was like, "Oh, you're a wizard," but it was pretty obvious that he was going to attack at some point in the race, and it was likely that was going to happen on that climb. Eventually, he attacked. We had, like, genuinely, the first time we went over the Castelfidardo, almost no splits, but that second time that Van der Poel attacked, the entire group was getting destroyed left and right. We saw that Alaphilippe was one of the riders that first came up with Van der Poel, and then suddenly he started moving back. And there's a few theories to this. First theory being that it looked like he had a mechanical or something was the first thing I noticed because he was looking behind all the time. The second thing is he was done. And the third thing is Almeida was not at the front of the race at that point. So either he went back and helped Almeida and then died, or he died completely and didn't help Almeida. We don't know the conclusion there. I don't have a clue. I don't think you know either because there was no coverage of that. We saw the front of the group. And this was with a good 60 kilometers to go that the race completely opened up because Van der Poel made that move. This first Castelfidardo made the group split up in, I think, a group of 12, 13 first, and then it was the rest of the peloton.
So, Alaphilippe, my theory on it, just to duck in on Benji, highlighted it, is that he doesn't like the wet and cold. We saw that in the that one day French race. Can't remember what its name was. That Simon Clark won at the start of last year. So that's my little theory on that. Um, anyway, maybe he just didn't want it. Maybe he was like, "Wow, this is so cold. I'm just going to rest up from Milano San Remo, get some warm stuff on." Mathieu van der Poel after the race, when asked why did you attack with 60 kilometers to go, he said, "Because I was cold and wanted to warm up." So can't argue with that logic. Seriously, he said that. I'm not making that up. Anyway,
Great.
they got into this group with Wout van Aert and Pogacar, etc. Almeida was dropped. Bernal was following. He then attacked, followed by Higuita. And the group had riders like Bardet, Wout van Aert, Formolo, Pogacar, Serrano on Movistar, Aaron Baru, Benji's boy, Almeida, GVA was there for a while, Quintana, Yates, Bridgeback, Ciccone, Nibali, Demarchi, Rudy Mollard, Wellens, wet weather specialist, and Matteo Fabro. But then MVDP attacked again because you've got the GC battle, which is basically between Pogacar and Wout van Aert, and then MVDP is 20 minutes behind on GC. So he knew, if I just attack again, Pogacar followed me the first time and then tried to roll over and actually looked a bit stronger than Wout van Aert. If I attack again, Pogacar and Wout van Aert are probably going to be like, well, who cares? Let him do his thing, the crazy man, and then we can fight amongst ourselves later. So when you saw MVDP get that gap the second time, Benji, were you already like, this is a done deal?
Yeah, it was weird because it was in a bit of a descent that he was eating something. He was like eating in the descent, and he started getting a gap on the group behind. And I was like, is he eating? And he was eating, and nobody behind was eating into the gap that he was making. So that's obviously not great. And Van der Poel slowly but surely moved up, and I said again to my mom, he's gone. We're never seeing him again. This is the stage is over. And she was like, why am I watching then? Because we know who wins the race. And I couldn't really talk to her about that logic. The intricacies of GC and so forth aren't really up to her standards yet. I'm trying to teach, but it's going slow. And I think the situation there, it just kept on expanding. In that second group, we had a invaluable rider for Pogacar. In the last couple of days, no proper support for him. Micah working a tiny bit, Formula working a tiny bit, but for today, Formula was godlike for him. This is the perfect Formula parkour. The weather is perfect for Formula, and it paid off because he kept on pacing at the front of the group.
Yes.
Not as hard as Van der Poel. Van der Poel diving into every single corner like a madman, pacing like a crazy madman, the same way he did in that Bing Bang Tour stage last year, in the exact same way, pacing like mad the entire stage from that point. In the second group, we were anticipating stuff that Van Aert would perhaps attack Pogacar, Pogacar would attack Van Aert. Pogacar doesn't need to attack Van Aert, he needs to play defensively. But he might want to attack if he wants to extend his gap. And I think it all depends on whether Van Aert or not would do an attack before the final circuit or on the final circuit, and whether he was able to follow that or not. And I think there's not too much else to share really from that point onwards to, I think, the last 20 kilometers, right? Because despite this race being
Your point about not full saying, not Fabro, combination of two, Formula. We need to give him some credit because I think you and I, rightly, we shit on UAE in the, well, maybe we didn't shit on it, but we're like, oh, the train wasn't great on Praticativo. You mentioned it, Benji. Formula is not a high mountain guy. He is good in a medium mountain breakaway on his day, but these sort of stages is where he's good. Liège style course, etc. He's absolutely banging. So that's where he's really good. But that's the problem, that they're kind of using him as their like second to last man in the mountain train. So
yeah.
anyway, that's a problem for a later date. The group was going slow. It really swelled with all those riders and none of the GC contenders attacking. Everyone let the group go out to, well, Formula was pacing to keep it together. Gap out to MVDP nearly 3 minutes. Feline attacked Benji with like 30 Ks to go or
Yes.
25 Ks to go, joined by Serrano and Demarchi. Wellens, how many times did Wellens attack? I know you were keeping account of it.
Was Soler that was moving up the last time? Serrano was in the group a lot. He worked a
Soler,
lot. He
sorry,
attacked a few times, but Soler was the last
the
one to attack.
disrespect.
Yeah, the disrespect, man. Come on. Wellens, when there's rain, he attacks 20,000 times. I think that I tweeted throughout the stage, what are we going to see more of, the DNFs during the stage, or the amount of times that your boy Wellens attacks here in the rain? And I think he attacked at least 10 or 20 times, which is fun to see. I love when a rider shows himself, even if he's in a situation where Van der Poel was moving up so much with his gap. A minute 20, a minute 40, 2 minutes, 2 minutes 20, 2 minutes 30. And that was roughly where Fellini started that attack. Fellini stayed with the group of Soler and Demarchi on that 2 minutes 30. The peloton group fell back a bit to 3 minutes. And that's where the race started changing around, didn't it? Because the way that they went into the final circuit. Yeah, they went into the final circuit, and the first climb once again in the circuit is Castelfidardo, the steep climb. Everybody's expecting Van Aert to attack Pogacar. And we see Van der Poel slowly but surely losing a tiny bit of his gap. I wasn't really concerned at all in the last 15 kilometers. I think it was the last 15 kilometers really that he still had 2 minutes and a half on that second
17
group.
Ks to go.
2 minutes and a half.
Off.
Yeah, that's a crazy gap on the group. And we see that Van Aert is moving up on that Castelfidardo. Actually, we didn't see it. I'm expecting that that's how it happened, because Van Aert was suddenly first on the view. We saw that he was first in the group, and people were dropping off the back. And Pogacar, who was sitting in second or third wheel, makes a move. He attacks on the right of Van Aert, drops him off his wheel directly. Van Aert has nothing to respond. He keeps his own tempo, didn't even try to close down the gap to Pogacar. He obviously was trying to survive at that point because he looked like he was suffering like a madman. Pogacar wasn't. Pogacar was ready to try and hunt down Van der Poel if it was remotely possible. Likely he didn't think so. Likely he was like, I'm going to gain a bit of time on Van Aert here for GC. That's perfect. I've got a bit of a gap now.
He was attacking for GC.
Yeah, exactly. And he went to that, I think, the group of Fellini, and that group was starting to splinter. I think Fellini was the last rider of the group that was left when Pogacar went to that group. Was it Soler?
Fellini and Soler were there. Yeah, and then Pogacar was like, you're going too slowly, dropped them on the next rise. And I was saying this in Messenger. I was like, people were saying, Wout van Aert, we said on the preview yesterday, Wout van Aert needs to team up with Van der Poel to attack Pogacar. But then when I saw the really wet weather, this is Pogacar's terrain. He is elite in the wet weather. He's just so good in it. I think heat is what kind of brings him back down to earth a little bit. Adam Yates stronger than him on her feet on stage 3 UAE tour. But really cold weather, terrible conditions, up and down climbs. Pogacar is almost the best in the world. And his ability to, I think this is somehow tied into his recovery between stages in the third week of a Grand Tour, Benji. His ability, because the cold affects calories and how many calories you're burning. We saw that with MVDP in Yorkshire in 2019. Pogacar just seems to be able to get those calories in, even in the cold, and he's got enough food, and he just keeps going strong. And he just kept motoring. And that's when the second part of this stage got even more exciting, where we were like, no fucking way is Pogacar going to chase down MVDP. When did you start to believe it actually could happen, Benji? When it went under 2 minutes with like 8Ks to go?
I think I started having the idea that it could all come together with a good 1 minute and a half left on the clock. I think that was with 6.5 kilometers to go. And we know that Van der Poel usually rides at a pretty high pace. Obviously, if he's doing a 50k solo, he's going to try and ride the hardest he can. But he started looking the same way that he did in Yorkshire 2019, the one you've been referring to, the one where he attacked in the Dutch jersey, and started having, he was boinking on the climb, and he basically looked like he was suffering so much and that he couldn't put watts into the pedals anymore. And we've seen this before in Yorkshire 2019. I was getting worried when I saw that. When I saw that first time, I was like, oh shit, this time is going to go down so quickly. Pogacar, who's like, he was still dancing on the pedals sometimes. He wasn't looking amazing either, but he still had something left. You noticed that. Van Aert in third position basically in the race. He dropped the Marquis, who was his helper, for a tiny bit off his wheel. He passed Feline into third position. The gap there, I think he was a good 30 seconds behind Pogacar at that point. And Pogacar slowly but surely kept moving that gap down. I think we went into the last 4.5 kilometers and it was going towards 1 minute 10. And then he came to the real twist for me where I
And
was
there's the
like,
one big climb left.
yeah, that one climb left is not really the biggest climb today. It's just a very, it's the same gradient upwards. It's not the steepest gradient, but towards the line. It's not the steepest climb at all of the day, but it's going to hurt. It's basically not a false flat, but just above that. And Pogacar keeps moving up, and the gap comes down. 1 minute with a good 3 minutes in. There are 3 kilometers left, something like that. 1 minute left. I was like, on paper, this is impossible. 1 minute in 3 kilometers. Usually someone gets that. But we know that Van der Poel was suffering so much. So in my mind, I was like, oh my God, this could actually come together. And I started getting really worried when at 1.5 kilometers, he started seeing Van der Poel riding ahead of him a few hundred meters. And that's where I was like, oh boy, this is going to be madness on the line. Imagine if this all comes together and we get a sprint between these two on the last section, dying swans crossing the line. Imagine if Pogacar would win a sprint against Van der Poel at the end of the stage.
Sprint.
Yeah, exactly. He looked like he was literally dying on his bike, which we hope no one does. And he kept riding Van der Poel, and in the last kilometer, it looked like he got a bit extra, and he started going on his pedals again, and then was sitting down again. And I think that was an extra where I was like, okay, he's gonna make it. Because, that last little pinch, and I think that was the last pinch he needed to bring this one home. But we got a front view from the fixed camera view at a good 400 meters to go, 300 meters to go, where Van der Poel was there. He crossed the corner. 10 seconds later, Pogacar crossed the corner. And I was like, oh no, imagine if this is Roglic versus Gino Mader once again. Imagine if Pogacar crosses the line ahead of Mathieu Van der Poel and the entire internet goes mad at Pogacar because he didn't let the Van der Poel win here. That would have been the perfect follow-up of yesterday. But towards the end, it looked like Pogacar was suffering as well.
Can't even get a World Tour contract.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that in the last section, everybody was hoping that Van der Poel would take it, or people that support Pogacar were probably also like, oh, Pogacar could perhaps come back. And in the last couple of meters, it became clear that the rider who was riding at the front for 50 kilometers alone was going to take home the stage, a heroic stage with weather that made it so legendary. One of the best stages I've ever seen on TV, next to the likes of a Montalcino 2010 Giro stage by Evans, 2014 Tour de France cobble stage by Nibali, a Paris-Roubaix Heyman victory with Bonin coming second in 2016. Those types of stages, this is where that fits. It's one of the best stages I've ever seen, hands down.
Iconic stage, had everything, had the early attack from MVDP, it had the GC tension between Pogacar and Wout van Aert. It had Pogacar showing them his cojones, attacking right in the face of Wout van Aert, going for extra time on GC. On the stage, we said suited Wout van Aert to try and put time back into Pogacar before before the ITT. Pogacar even had a mechanical, didn't care. He lost his chain shifting into that last climb over that gutter through that corner Benji mentioned. And we had MVDP bonking once again. And he said afterwards he couldn't do 200 watts. He couldn't hold 200 watts on any of the climbs. And that's why the gap, you probably heard, a minute with 4Ks to go on undulating terrain? It's not an HC climb. How can he not hold a minute? Well, he couldn't pedal. And apparently Pogacar was doing averaging 380 in the last 25 minutes or something. So
crazy.
Crazy stage. Pogacar in the cold and wet, mark it down, nasty in those conditions. And MVDP, it's legendary, but if Pogacar had someone helping him, or had gone a little bit earlier, or the finish was 500 meters later, he wouldn't have won this stage. Seems like, and that's why we love him. Yorkshire 2019, disaster. Today, he's like, fuck it, I'll do it again because I'm cold. Matthew, if you're cold, put on some gloves and a jacket. Why are you wearing summer gear? Attacking is not your only option. Other riders just put a jacket on or some gloves. It's like, I don't know, maybe Alperson finished. Who's their kit manufacturer? Maybe they don't produce them. He only has the Summer Netherlands kit and the skin suit. Man, but that's why it is. He made for a fantastic stage. But yeah, any last thoughts? Actually, I'll do the results before I throw to you, Benji. Van der Poel first, Pogacar second, 10-second gap in the end. Wout van Aert third, still great from him, 39 seconds back on Pogacar. He clawed it back and he held it to Pogacar too. It was actually more than 40 seconds, 45 seconds at one point, that gap. Feline fourth, Bernal fifth, Formolo sixth, Wellen seventh, Demarchi eighth, Landa ninth with Fabro 10th, 2 minutes 25 back. Iconic stage like that Tirreno stage 6. GC not actually changed that much, just Pogacar extending his lead on Wout van Aert out to 1:15. Landa into third, 3 minutes back. Quintana lost 7 places on GC.
Higuita.
Thomas, Fulsang, and Carr lost 14. Where's Higuita, Benji? I was scrolling down PCS. I can't find it.
Completely destroyed at a certain point. He was in the initial break
Holy
that
fuck.
was a 5-man group with the likes of a Van der Poel, Higuita. We had Van Aert there.
He was closing Bernal.
Yeah, he was closing Bernal indeed. And then suddenly he started moving backwards on the moment where Bernal had those DSM jacket issues that he couldn't get his jacket on. At that moment, Higuita was just like, he was standing still. He was riding backwards of that climb. Oh my god. And where did he end?
He's now 37th on GC, 21 minutes back.
Oh my god.
So he finished like
21 minutes back.
That's why I'm telling you. When people say shorter stages are more exciting, they're lying to you. You're saying, why do they have the extra 100 Ks of flat at the start? Well, it's because when riders get put into difficulty in the cold and wet, it like extends those gaps. People crack properly, people that are fueling properly, like the difference between them and others gets exaggerated compared to a small stage. That being said, small stages can be exciting as well, as we saw in Paris. But yeah, crazy for Pogacar. Sorry, I didn't finish the top 10 GC. Bernal now 4th, 330, moving up from 11th to 4th. Fabro Benji 5th, 354. Wellens 6th. Almeida down to 7th, 442, just a bit behind Wellens. Bardet, Nibali, and Yates all like between 4 and 7 minutes back. So, what about Matteo Fabro Benji? I think he's underrated, but not for very long. I think he's very, very strong.
Yeah, I think that Tirreno is also kind of the race where he showed himself the first time last year. He was third in that stage. Van der Poel won the final stage. Also showed himself as a decent climber on these hilly peaks. And it was a very similar race, that one, because it also had a circuit with like 3 hills in it. Last year, I think stage 7 to Loretta. Van der Poel won that on the final climb, passing. Was it Fabro on the last climb or was it someone else? I do not remember.
I think it was.
The only thing I know is that Fabro is a really strong rider in these types of stages. And I feel like the Giro added those stages last year. I hope they keep on doing it because I don't think we've seen stages in this format in the Tour de France since the likes of 2012 or something. So I like those in Grand Tours. I like these heroic stages or stages that could go heroic if these circumstances arise. And today, the circumstances arise surely because we had one hell of a race, and those are kind of my final thoughts. I want to celebrate the moment because last year we followed cycling more than probably usual with the Lanterne Rouge cycling podcast. I think we all watched every single race anyway, we too, but I think we watch it even more now and we're closer to it. And I think that this preseason has been one of the best preseasons ever just because of that, because we're in the moment, we're in these moments and we're trying to share that with you as much as possible here, how we interpret everything, how we feel. And we also enjoy so much that you all give feedback on how you're enjoying the races. What's your takeaways on the stage? So definitely keep doing that on Twitter, comment sections, stuff like that. Even in the 5-star reviews you give us, and will keep giving us. Thank you very much for that.
It feels very special to be knowing, even with 20 kilometers left in the stage, that you're watching cycling history. You're watching one of the stages that the reason I started my channel, started posting properly in June 2019. I started that channel to go back mainly and reanalyze and relook at historic, iconic cycling stages, and to be able to watch them and cover them in real time. And it's crazy. And I'm a pretty, uh, I get underwhelmed by most things in life, but even then, even these things, I get a little bit emotional sometimes. Tomorrow's stage from Castel Raimondo to Lido di Fermo, 169k stage. I'm going to say it again, Benji. Wout van Aert wants to gain time. Tomorrow's stage looks pretty good for him. Seriously, like it's a light version of the stage they had today. A circuit again. They do climbs that are like 3Ks at 5.2%, the Monte San Giusto. The final's flat, but there's a few rollers before then. I'm trying to look where the intermediate sprint is, Benji. There's an intermediate sprint about 2/3, 3/4 the way through on the flat before I don't know what climb that's called, the Fermo climb, maybe. It's not that big a climb. Wout van Aert's got to try something if he's got anything in the legs tomorrow, Benji, a long ranger. What about Mathieu van der Poel? He says he's never gone that deep ever. Does that mean he's winning tomorrow?
I don't think so. I think that it's gonna be a reduced group that is gonna be sprinting for it, and I think that we can't expect too much from Van Aert tomorrow. The reason that I don't expect too much from Van Aert tomorrow, as in, I don't expect action mid stage for him. If it comes down to a sprint, he's my favorite for it. But just to be clear about that, but I don't think he's gonna open early. He said in an interview past the race that he's pretty much settled it on the second spot in this Tirreno, that he just wants to win the stage extra from this point onwards. So he's got 2 more stages to do that. That's tomorrow with the hilly terrain and then a flat sprint. That would fit him a lot. And we also have the time trial in which Ghana is participating, so he's going to lose that. So he's going to have to do it tomorrow if he wants to win that stage. I don't think he's going to go early. I think Van der Poel's going to be like, fuck that, I'm not doing that again tomorrow. So he's not going to do a 50k attack. Even if he does, he's fucking crazy. But hey, he keeps on being crazy. Last time, Strade Bianche, what were my words? What were my words at Strade? I said that every single time that Van der Poel is winning something, he does it in a spectacular way. And he proved that once again today. Like, there's no way this man can get just a boring victory. Like, he doesn't do that. He doesn't do boring, and that's why he's one of the most entertaining bike riders that is in the peloton right now.
But yeah, I think a minute 12 is a bridge too far for Wout van Aert with Pogacar. Pogacar looked fresh over the finish line, which is kind of terrifying. What about, before we get out of here, Benji, Milano San Remo? Cold, wet conditions, 200k stage, MVDP emptying the tank. Are you concerned? Does this change your view on Milano San Remo? The 3 favourites, Alaphilippe, Wout van Aert, and MVDP, Pogacar, question mark.
If he's last year I had Van der Poel.
Do you think this changes anything?
Last year I had Van der Poel as my favourite for Milano San Remo. He didn't end up being in the form that I expected him to be in the classics, the Italian classics at the start of that restart season after COVID. This year he's been absolutely phenomenal. I think he's winning Milano San Remo, and the only thing that is kind of stopping me from saying that completely is because I have not followed at all whether that finish is going to be taking the normal route, whether they're going to add those 10 kilometers they were talking about at a certain point. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if they actually finish on the spot that they usually do, and therefore I don't know if it's perhaps a reduced sprint if it's like 10 kilometers later. But I think that we've got amazing riders that are going to make that an amazing race, and I think Van der Poel's my favorite for it personally. And I think on the community tab of the YouTube channel we did the same. I said it in the previous pod yesterday, I think, that we had a community post on it, a poll on which you could vote, and Van der Poel won that with 60%. So looks like the LRCP army is slightly skewed towards Van der Poel on that as well.
That's been our recap of Tirreno Adriatico, Stage 6. Thanks very much to Lacole, our show partner for the entire year, making this possible, supporting the podcast. You can go and support them through the link below, as well as our Ko-Fi link if you're so inclined. But more importantly, you can also give this a like on YouTube, or if you're listening on podcast players, give it a review on whatever podcast platform allows you to do that. What a day of racing. I'm exhausted. I got to go lie down. We'll see you with Tirreno Adriatico Stage 6 tomorrow. Ciao.